This is Democracy Watch. Mark, we've covered the Georgia State Election Board rule change where they mandated that every single vote cast in Georgia would need to be hand counted. That rule was recently overturned by a state court judge. The RNC appealed the issue to the Georgia Supreme Court. What just happened?
They lost. The Republican National Committee thought that it could appeal this ruling that put on hold these terrible rules that would have really hamstrung election officials in meeting their obligations in the post-election. The RNC took a gamble. They thought that they could skip over the Court of Appeals, go straight to the Georgia Supreme Court, and get the Georgia Supreme Court to overturn that lower court ruling, and they lost big time.
Can you speak to what would have happened if these rules were kept in place?
Yeah, look, these were put in place by MAGA members of the state election board who, remember, were given a shout out at a political rally by Donald Trump. These were people who Donald Trump knew their first and last names. Now, Donald Trump's not a detail guy. I mean, he, occasionally is just found swaying to the music.
He's more of a concept of a plan guy.
More of a concept of a blood guy, yeah. So he knew their names because he was told for that political rally to give them a shout out because he wanted them to pass these rules that he thought would hamstring the certification process by letting election deniers refuse to certify accurate results and require a hand count at the precincts and thereby create kind of chaos and delay, right? And so he thought he was pulling one over by getting these MAGA members to do this, but they didn't count on the fact that the state courts would stand up to them and stand up to them really unanimously. There were several court rulings, but the biggest one, the one that the RNC, where they lost across the board, they thought they could take to the high court in Georgia, a pretty conservative state Supreme Court, and the state Supreme Court shut them down, said, we are not going to even expedite this case. So this case is now not even going to be heard for some number of months now. And so for 2024, these rules will not be in effect.
Okay, so that's an allusion to the fact that these rules aren't necessarily outright dead, even if they're dead for this election cycle. Does the prospect that these rules might stand in future election cycles concern you for elections moving forward?
Look, everything concerns me. I'm concerned about the election that's coming up in a few days. I'm concerned about the election that are coming up in a few years. And I'm worried about it because what did we see after 2020? After Donald Trump lost and after the violent insurrection on January 6th, we thought maybe we would see a more responsible Republican Party. We thought maybe the fever would break. Yep. But instead, in 2021, we saw legislature after legislature around the country controlled by Republicans enact new, tougher voter suppression laws and election subversion laws, including in the state of Georgia. And in fact, the state of Georgia has passed a series of election subversion and voter suppression laws, even after the first big one that caused the Major League Baseball to move the All-Star game. And so I worry about what the future is in this case, but I worry about what Republican legislatures are going to do in 2025 as they look forward to 2026 and 2027 and 2028, because the fever hasn't broken. I mean, here we are a few days from the election, and who the hell are they running again for president? Donald Trump. Are they any more moderate? No, they're actually more extreme. More Republicans are more MAGA supporting than they even were in 2020. The midpoint of what it takes to be a Republican has shifted so far towards authoritarianism that, frankly, let's be honest, we are now using the word fascist to describe the Republican Party nominee, not in an ironic way, not even in a hyperbolic way, but in actually a very descriptive way. And so we all need to realize that, yeah, this case may have been solved for 2024, and that's important, and I don't want to diminish that. But the threats to democracy will continue.
With these rules from the Georgia State Election Board out of the way, what worries you most about Georgia moving forward now? I know that there are a number of other rules that were challenged by the RNC. I believe, as far as I know, none of them were successful either. So what are you looking at in terms of what Georgia has to offer?
Look, I worry about everything. I worry that we will see last-minute voter challenges, something you and I have talked about in prior episodes. We've seen mass challenges by Republican vigilantes trying to prevent people from being able to stay registered to vote. They've had some setbacks in court recently, so that's good. We have seen in Georgia efforts by Republicans to sue to make it harder to vote for whole categories of voters, including people voting from overseas or in the military. So I worry about that. But then when we get to the post-election, even without these rules changes, there are election deniers in office. Like, that's just the reality. And that's true in Georgia, and it's true around the country. One of those election deniers in Fulton County has actually sued the state of Georgia in order to say that even without these rules, she has the right to not accept election results. Right. Now, she lost at the trial court, but she just appealed that. And that case now is potentially going to go up on appeal in Georgia. So I worry about election deniers. And then finally, I worry that 4 years of lying and misinformation and disinformation has taken its toll on average, everyday Americans. People who used to take pride in civics and used to look forward to the voting process as a bipartisan expression of democracy. And now they are constantly inundated with these lies and information that suggests voting is not safe, voting is not secure, that their vote will be ignored or will be canceled out. And I worry what it does to the civic culture and to people's participation in Georgia. So I just hope everyone is listening. Tune all that out. Like, just make sure you vote. Like, your vote's going to count. It's not going to be canceled out. Like, you need to not let the naysayers and the cynics and the people spreading disinformation get too far in your head. We need to be aware of it. We need to be cognizant that it's out there, but we can't let it dominate our discussion for the last few days in this election.
Well said. With that said, I know that you had just mentioned what's going to happen in the aftermath of the election. You, me, and Congressman Jamie Raskin are going to be hosting an event called The Race to Certify What Happens After Election Day. That's going to be open to the public, so we'll put the link to attend if you want to watch right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video. It's going to be a great event. Obviously, I don't think it's lost on anybody watching right now the sheer amount of work that Marc, you and your team have done to protect democracy, and the work that you're doing to make sure that the aftermath of this election is safe and secure. And of course, Congressman Raskin is a former constitutional law professor. He is the preeminent scholar of the Constitution in Congress right now. So this is going to be an amazing conversation. And again, highly recommend for folks watching right now to tune in. So we'll put the link right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video.
Yeah, and you just wrote a great book about basically about these same topics. And by the way, he's not going to brag about this. New York Times bestseller, by the way. And it was a great book and a great read. And I hope everyone goes out and gets a copy. But it fundamentally talks about these attacks on democracy and how they play up in the age of Donald Trump being on the ballot. So I'm really looking forward to this discussion with you and Congressman Raskin. He's a really great guy. He's very smart, obviously a constitutional professor. And, I'm really looking forward to this discussion. So I hope everyone signs up and attends.
Marc, there was a recent event where Donald Trump was on stage with Brian Kemp. And I know that you and I you especially have been a leading voice in batting back this claim that Brian Kemp, along with Brad Raffensperger, are these moderate heroes, even though this is the same Brad Raffensperger that supported SB 202, which is the voter suppression law that you were alluding to before. Now you've got Brian Kemp, who is on stage sitting alongside Donald Trump as they rub elbows with each other. What did you make of that moment?
Well, I made it. I'd rather be Brian Kemp than Kristi Noem. I mean, Brian Kemp was sitting there thinking, like, this could have gone much worse. I could have had to clap along with Donald Trump while he swayed to the music. That's right. Remember that with Kristi Noem?
Yeah. That's I guess he was smart not to host an event, not to host a late night event for the sundowning Republican candidate for president.
But in all seriousness, look, Brian Kemp is a rock rib Republican, and he may appear like Nikki Haley occasionally, like playing Hamlet, but at the end of the day, he is a MAGA Republican. He supports Donald Trump, notwithstanding what Donald Trump has said about him, notwithstanding what Donald Trump has said about his wife. He is supporting Donald Trump for president. He is going all out for Donald Trump for president, and don't let him fool you.
Well, of course, we'll stay on top of everything that happens in Georgia, including whether the Georgia State Election Board is going to try and pass some more absurd rules with the blessing of Donald Trump here. For those who are watching, if you want to support the invaluable work that Marc and his team are doing in the courts, which is ground zero, especially as we enter this election and post-election landscape, a small step that we can all take is to sign up for Democracy Docket. It's the news outlet Marc founded to focus on everything voting in elections. I'll put the link right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video. And of course, as we mentioned before, please sign up to attend our panel, me, Marc, and Jamie Raskin, where we discuss what to expect in the aftermath of Election Day. I'll put that in the post description of this video as well. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
I'm Marc Elias.
This is Democracy Watch.